Okay, so for today's video, we're going to look at adding fractions with different denominators. And once we get this down, you can also subtract fractions with different denominators. And the denominator is the bottom number here. So if we have 2/5 plus 1/4, we need to do some steps before we can add these together. So let's go ahead and slowly, step by step, have a look at this. And the first thing we should think about here is when we have fractions with the same denominator, the same bottom number, it's very simple. And let's look at why that's so simple. The reason why it's so simple is because the pieces are the same size. I might not have drawn it perfectly, but you can see these pieces are all the same size, or they should be. These pieces are all the same size. So if we have 1/8 plus 3/8, it's simply 4/8. And then we can reduce that. But you can see all you need to do is just add that straight across. And your numerator would be 4. You add the two numerators or top numbers. When my numerators are different, however, the pieces are different sizes. So here I have 1/2 plus 3/4. This piece is larger than these pieces. I can't just add them together because they're not the same size. So that's why we need to find what we call a common denominator. And common in this usage means the same in denominator would be our bottom number. So if we have the same bottom number, like here, the pieces are the same size, and then you just add them and it's simple. So this takes a little bit of knowledge about fractions and finding equivalent fractions, but we'll go through it step by step to figure out how to do this. And now why don't we start with this one that I had on the front page, 2/5 plus 1/4. And you can see we have fifths and we have fourths, so we need a common denominator. And this is the first thing you have to figure out how to do. Eventually you'll be able to just think of this automatically, you'll get used to it. But for now, let me show you a little bit of a slower way, which is to list some multiples of these numbers. So multiples of 5, and maybe list out 5 or 6. So we have 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. That's probably good. And now I want some multiples of 4. So I'm counting by 4s here. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, and there we have a common multiple, which is 20. So now I need to change 2/5 into 20ths, and I need to change 1/4 into 2/20ths. And this is where some knowledge of equivalent fractions is really useful. But basically, what would I multiply 2/5 by to get 20 in the denominator? And it needs to be a form of 1. So 2/5 times what would give me 20 in the denominator? And you know 5 times 4, so it would be 4/4. So 4/4 times 2/5, and to multiply, if you don't know this, you just go straight across. It's going to be 8/20ths. And I need to do the same thing for 1/4. We want 20ths on the bottom. So 4/4 times what would give us 20 as a denominator, and it is 5/5. And here, that's our 20 on the bottom, and 1 times 5 is going to give us our 5 on top. Now we've got the same size part. They're in 20ths, so we can simply add the numerators together, and 8 plus 5 is going to give us 13/20ths, and there is your answer. So this is probably a little confusing for you. We're going to do a few more just to get used to it, but remember, first step is to find a common denominator, which is what we did here. Then you find the equivalent fractions, so you have a common denominator, and then you add them together. So let's do next one. Why don't we do this one right here, which is 1/2 plus 3/4. So we'll try that. And this one is actually a little bit simpler. And again, the first step is find common denominator, and you should be able to do this very simply in the future, but I'm still going to list this out. 2, 4, 6, 8, that should be enough. How about 4, 8? Oh wait, there it is. We already have a common denominator, which is 4. So now we need to find our equivalent fractions. So the nice thing here is that 3/4 is already in force. We don't need to change anything. It stays the same. How do we get 1/2 into force? What do we multiply that by to get force? You're going to multiply it by 2/2. And there's your 4th in the denominator. 1 times 2. There it is. And now we have force for both of these. So we can add those together, and we have 5/4 as the answer. And you can change this into another number, a mixed number, but we'll save that for another time. For now, 5/4 is what we'll call the answer to this. Let's try one more. 3/5 minus 1/2, and now we're doing subtraction, but it's the same exact idea. So first step, common denominator. So let me list out for fifths. I'm going to go 5, 10, 15, 20. That should be enough. And for halves, we'll count out 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And there we have our common denominator. As you can see, we need to change both of these into tenths. So let me rewrite it again. And I need to turn 3/5 into tenths. So what do I multiply it by? And the answer is 2/2. And that would give us 6/10. And 1/2, what do we multiply it by? The answer is 2 times what gives you 10? 5, so the answer is 5/5. And that gives us 5/10. And now 6/10 minus 5/10 is 1/10. And it's going to take some practice to get this. Let's just try one more subtraction, just so we can see what that looks like one more time. And we'll do 8/10 minus 3/4. So here we have counting by tens, and then we'll count by fours, and that's going to give us our common denominator right there, which is 20. So let's rewrite it. There it is, and we're trying to turn this into 20ths, so we need to multiply 8/10 by 2/2. And again, this part, eventually you'll be able to do it in your head, but at first it might help to write it out like this. 16/20ths. How do we turn 3/4 into 20ths? Think about 4 times what gives you 20, and then that would be 5/5. And that means we have 15/20ths. So the answer is 1/20th. And I will put a link to some more examples on here. And also, if you're having trouble with this step of finding the equivalent fractions, I'll post a link about that and how that works and why that works. But that is basically how you can find common denominators and add and subtract any fraction you come across. Thank you for watching. Bye.